And that would involve that you lose clients to companies that behave in a non-aggressive way. And insurance companies are peaceful organizations for another reason as well. You cannot insure yourself against any type of risk. There are certain risks that are uninsurable. You can insure yourself against the risk of your house burning down. You can insure yourself against death by accidents and so forth. But you cannot insure yourself against burning down your own house or killing myself tomorrow in a suicide attempt. Now, the implication of this is you can also not insure yourself against people doing something about you, hitting you, if you yourself provoked the conflict. Insurance companies will not cover this risk of being beaten by other people that you yourself first aggressed against or provoked into doing something bad to you. That is, insurance companies will only protect you and cover the risk of certain risks if you yourself submit to a code of civilized behavior. If you just say, look, I will behave in a nice way, I will never provoke anyone, and so forth, only then will they protect you, but not if you behave in uncivilized behavior. And this also involves that insurance companies will by and large insist that you do not engage in vigilante justice. That is, that you just take the law into your own hand, because this involves the risk of third parties getting involved in the conflict. So they will by and large insist instead that whenever conflicts arise, you have to submit yourself to some regular procedures, finding out what was the course of events, who initiated certain things, who responded in such and such a way. That is, vigilante justice will by and large be outlawed or made almost impossible by insurance companies insisting that in order to reduce our own costs of operation, in order to make it possible that lower premiums will be offered to you, you have to submit yourself to these types of procedures. In addition, insurance companies will actually encourage people to own arms. You realize that states try to disarm us. Imagine you go to some protection agency, and the protection agency would tell you, look, before I start protecting you, first you have to hand over all weapons to me. The knives out of your kitchen drawers, your revolvers, whatever it is. No, every normal person would say, this is a strange protector that insists, first of all, that I must hand over everything that I can use to defend myself, and only if I have handed over all of these things to them, only then will they possibly protect me. You would think, this is a fishy type of organization. Insurance companies who would do something like this would obviously go out of business instantly. Instead, they will offer you lower premiums if you can show that you know how to safely handle weapons to defend yourself, because then the risk of something happening for which they have to pay is lower. You get reduced insurance rates, for instance, if you have a safe at home right now. In the same way, knowing how to use weapons would tend to reduce premiums. Last and most importantly, a system of competing protection agencies would have a twofold impact on the development of law. On the one hand, it would allow for a greater variability of law. That is, rather than imposing a uniform set of standards onto everyone, as under statist conditions, protection agencies could compete against each other not just via price, but also through product differentiation. There could exist side by side, for instance, Catholic protection agencies or insurers that would apply canon law. There could be Jewish agencies that apply Mosaic law, Muslim agencies that apply Islamic law, and agencies applying secular law or any variety of another. All of them sustained by a voluntarily paying clientele. Consumers could choose the law applied to them and their property. No one would have to live under foreign law. And on the other hand, the very same system of private law and order production would promote a tendency toward the unification and harmonization of law, because the domestic law, that is the Catholic law, the Jewish law, the Roman law, and so forth, would apply, of course, only to people and property of those who had chosen it. Canon law, for instance, would apply only to professed Catholics and deal solely with intra-Catholic conflicts. Yet it is also possible, of course, that a Catholic might come into conflict with a subscriber of some other law code, for instance, a Muslim. If both law codes reached the same or a similar conclusion, no difficulties would arise. However, if competing law codes arrived at distinctly different conclusions, as they would, at least in some cases, of course, then a problem arises. Now, the domestic law, that is the intra-group law, would be useless in this case, but naturally every insured person would want protection against the contingency of intergroup conflicts also. In this situation, it cannot be expected that one insurer and the subscribers to its law code simply subordinate their judgment to that of another insurer and its law. Rather, for all the parties involved, there is again only one credible and acceptable way out of this predicament. And this is, from the outset, every insurer would be compelled to submit itself and its clients to arbitration by truly independent third parties. And this third party would not be only an independent entity, but at the same time, it would be the unanimous choice of both parties. It would be agreed upon because of its commonly perceived ability to find mutually agreeable, fair solutions in cases of intergroup conflict. Moreover, if an arbitrator, as I explained before, failed in this task and arrived at conclusions that were perceived as unfair or biased by either one of the insurers or their clients, this person or agency would not likely be chosen as an arbitrator again in the future. And as a result of the constant cooperation of various insurers and arbitrators, a tendency toward the unification of property and contract law and the harmonization of the rules of procedure, evidence, and conflict resolution would be set in motion. In buying protection insurance, every insurer and insured becomes a participant in some integrated system of conflict avoidance and peacekeeping. Every single conflict and damage claim, regardless of where and by and against whom, would fall always into the jurisdiction of one or more specific insurance agency and would be handled either by an insurer's domestic insurer and domestic law, or by the so-called international law provisions and procedures agreed upon by everyone in advance. So, in one word, instead of permanent conflict, injustice, and legal insecurity as under the present status conditions in a private law society, peace, justice, and legal security would hold sway. Time is up, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppe. Please be comfortable to stay here or just join me here to answer a short dialogue. Okay? Bom, nós vamos então ter um rápido diálogo aproveitar essa oportunidade ímpar, e eu começo perguntando para a plateia se alguém tem alguma pergunta. Bom, teve competência, rapidez. Vamos lá, então. Uma pergunta, por favor, seja breve só por causa da questão do tempo. Eu peço que tragam um microfone, já que o evento está sendo gravado e transmitido ao vivo também na internet, e para os nossos registros.
Maybe I should mention that tomorrow my speech will be somewhat shorter than today. So certain questions that might arise today, I will have more time to answer tomorrow as well. I somehow thought that I would be the last speaker of the day, and we wouldn't be under less time constraints than we actually are. Tomorrow I will be the last speaker of the day, and my speech will be shorter, I promise. Just as a consolation, in case I will not be able to answer all questions that might pop up now.
E nós temos aqui o nosso presidente do Mises, que vai participar também com uma pergunta ao professor Hoppe. Mas, por favor, então, a sua primeira pergunta. Sim, por favor.
Boa tarde, gostaria de perguntar ao professor o que ele considera das opiniões do Robert Nozick, no livro Aqui Estado da Utopia, sobre essa questão das agências de proteção privadas, porque o Nozick desenvolveu esse raciocínio, só que ele é crítico à ideia de agências de proteção privada, porque ele acredita que elas vão inevitavelmente entrar em conflito, e isso acabaria levando à necessidade de que se criar um Estado ultramínimo e, consequentemente, um Estado mínimo. Queria que você desse sua opinião sobre a argumentação do Nozick quanto a essa questão das agências de proteção privadas.
I consider his answer completely unsatisfactory. Why would insurance companies necessarily come into conflict with each other? Because if they come in conflict with each other, that increases the cost of operation of these insurance companies, and they would lose clients if they would engage in this type of behavior. And in general, we know that there is, as in all other fields, there are fundamental reasons also why insurance companies would not engage in cartel agreements, because cartels tend to fall apart first because of internal pressure, so to speak. That is a fact that the most efficient company would lose out in any cartel agreement, and the least efficient companies would benefit from any cartel agreement. So why would the most efficient members of a cartel engage in such a behavior? And secondly, there is external pressure, because new firms can spring up and go into competition should the cartel be able to reduce supply of services and raise the price. So again, I find Nozick's objections entirely superficial, fanciful, with no basis in economic theory whatsoever.